Ever survived a truly terrible boss? You're in great company. Join me as I laugh, cringe, and learn alongside author Joel Hilchey, whose brand new book, The 6.5 Habits of Highly Defective Bosses, unpack the little quirks and the big blunders of accidental managers everywhere. Expect practical tips, relatable stories, and a sneak peek into the half habit that might just save your sanity, or at least your next performance review. Welcome back, everybody. Today is a very special day because I have a fellow author joining me with his very newly released book. And so we're going to jump right on in and introduce Mr. Joel Hilchey. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing great. Hope you are too.
Cannot complain. So I am so thrilled to have you on the show. I'm thrilled that we're getting you at the launch of your book, which is super exciting. I've been where you are, and I know how exhausting, yet exciting, yet stress-filled this moment is for you.
It's a whole marathon, like the writing was done so long ago, but then it's all the other pieces, the audiobook recording, the sharing it with people, talking about it. It's all the after the writing it part is done that is actually much more nebulous, but like much more challenging and much more important, probably in the grand scheme of things too,
It
But
is.
it's been a great journey so far.
So since we've told you you've written a book, tell us a little bit about the book.
Sure, the book is called The 6.5 Habits of Highly Defective Bosses, Serious Lessons for Accidental Managers. And it started, I wrote an article series a few years ago. And as I talked about it with people, they said, "Oh, that's funny. You should write more about that." And what do you do about those things, by the way? And talking about bosses sort of has a joining on effect for people where they want to share their stories. "Oh, I had a boss once. Yeah, absolutely. And you wouldn't believe this." And it became sort of a little challenge in my mind of like, do the stories that people are sharing, about their bad bosses, do they fit with my model? And I got most of them right, but a few of them adjusted over time. Once I said, I'm going to make this a real book, then it all kind of came together really nicely. And all the stories that people had shared became kind of part of it. And I realized, of course, my own journey was as an accidental boss, accidental manager. And so it was actually a really fun process to write as well.
So I've read the book and I really enjoyed it because I
Thank you.
feel like you and I created this kind of content with a very similar purpose. Is we
Mm,
wanted people who maybe weren't being the best bosses or best leaders that they thought they could be, that it was okay
yes.
because we had been there too and we've made all the mistakes too. And
Yes.
sometimes, even with the best intentions, we can get it wrong. And I loved
100%.
that. I loved that. I loved how the tone of it is so I'm saying this for the listeners out there. You should go get it. Simply because it is so practical and it is so approachable and there's humor in it because I caught myself laughing because I remember the same thing. So when I was
Oh,
doing my
good.
book,
Good. Yes.
when I was doing my book, I did the same thing. I went and asked a lot of questions, and I also had the same thing where every single person had a
Had a story to
story,
share with you. Yes.
which is why I was laughing because one of the stats you have in your book is 1 in 5 people have had a bad boss. And my first thought is I'm pretty sure 5 out of 5 people have had a bad boss based just on
Y-
talking to
yes.
folks. It seems
I
like there not a single person has ever gotten around that experience.
I think the stat is that 1 out of 5 people has a bad boss at
Oh,
any given moment.
that
And
would make more
but
sense.
yes, but I should check that actually now that you bring it up and say, oh gosh, did I get that stat wrong? Um, apparently, apparently, lots of people, most people have had some experience with a boss that's like not ideal. I don't know if I've ever asked somebody who's let's say age 25 plus, where they've said, "Gosh, I can't think of anybody that I've ever had." Often, most people can go back even into their teenage years. That I had a part-time job at a swimming pool once or something, and the boss didn't seem to know what was going on. and they don't identify it at the time necessarily, but
Yeah.
then they look back at it later. And you're totally right about this like feeling of, I guess, wanting it to be approachable. But like most people, when they have a story about a bad boss, they often seem to start it with some version of like, you know, he's a good guy, but or like she she really is successful in what she's built here. But like as a boss or as a manager, they or bad bosses are usually, I think, good people.
Yeah.
There are occasional bosses that probably are like just they're so far on on the scale of bad bosses that you go, I don't know if I'd want to hang out with that person ever. But a lot of people kind of said, I really actually liked my boss as a person,
Mm-hmm.
but I did not like them as a manager for our team. They were terrible for this, and they identified much smaller things, that were just sort of annoyances or like a nuisance almost, but that end up having these kind of big effects on the team and their own working environment.
Well,
So I fully agree with that. Yeah, we've all been there. That we've all done it, as you say. Uh,
but that's so important, and I think it's a message that begs repeating,
yes,
because we're such in an environment now where the pylon happens, and one
totally.
mistake feels like it could be career ending, and in some cases it is.
Yeah,
But to your point, I feel that so many leaders, what they get wrong are the little things. And so I'd like to hop into your 6.5 habits, because I
sure.
thought that those were, to a certain extent, it's the little things that we do every day that, if we don't get the little things right, turn into the big things that become I
Yes,
don't want to work with this person. This is the worst boss I've ever had. That
yes,
narrative can switch very quickly when we screw up the small stuff. So I'd love to have you walk us through a little bit that, like,
sure.
which of the habits, so for the people who
Do
haven't read it yet, talk to me about what of your habits would you say is your favorite one
oh
that you
gosh.
see as maybe the most common?
Okay. Actually, I'm going to go with what people will ask the question about first,
Oh,
which is what's the half habit? Uh, and so the half
I like the
habit,
half habit. I like the
yeah,
half habit.
the half habit is consistently inconsistent, which didn't really feel worthy of full habit status. Does inconsistency equate to habit form? So that this is the thing. So habitually inconsistent or consistently inconsistent really is about failing to provide enough consistency
Mm-hmm.
to be predictable. People thrive when things are predictable enough. They need certain, I don't know if it's metrics or goals. If you've ever had a boss where their priorities shift like daily, and you work hard on a thing, and then that project didn't matter in the end. They go, oh, well, that was a waste of time. Then why did I do that? Or a lot of, unfortunately, this is a lot of like founder entrepreneur folks
Mm-hmm.
who just get blown with the wind, and they come back from a new conference and they say, oh, I've got it. Here is the new thing. And the staff are left sort of, or the team is left in this kind of swirling chaos around
Yeah.
them, trying to pick up the pieces. And often the team themselves end up almost like being the executive function for that leader. They can't remember, they don't have lists, they whatever it is, they don't feel like this person is trustworthy with like guiding the team.
Mm-hmm.
The One of the techniques that comes out of this is like be a lighthouse, not a disco ball. Like, no, just ignore the imperfect metaphor in that a lighthouse also spins around, and of course the
No,
disco
no, no,
ball
no,
is.
no. I think it's actually a perfect metaphor, because a
Oh, good.
lighthouse is a beacon.
Yes,
It
yes,
is to provide direction. It is a beacon. And yes, the light spins, but it's so you know where the center is.
yes.
Versus a disco ball, it just emits light in every
It's
single direction. And it's beautiful to behold,
yes,
but it
sparkly,
doesn't give you
shiny.
any idea of where you're going. So
Right.
it's a perfect metaphor.
Eh, the I have definitely, as like an ADHD type, I have been the disco ball with a
Mhm.
100 new ideas and an inch of progress in a million directions. That sort of thing. That's really hard for the people around you or around me to handle. And so the key is you don't want to create too much consistency because that's boring and that's stagnant, and then you don't adapt or grow. Think of like places that have too much policy focus and not enough kind of what's actually real here. So you need enough consistency, but not too much consistency. So that is habit 6.5
Well, and I
as a
think
starting
about
point.
that idea about the balance between consistency and flexibility. So you
Yes.
and I are kind of opposite. So you definitely, you're saying you have very much your attention is splintered. I was like the program project manager. I am the one that
Mhm.
takes the use and figures out how to build the plan around you to execute to fulfillment.
Yes.
I am the one that when the leader would come back from vacation with an entirely new strategy of like, we have to do the old strategy plus the new ideas
Yes.
because, and we just have to fail fast. And so that meant teams were stretched even further.
Mhm.
And you were often left with the idea of what was this even for? Because you're doing so much work that ends up
Yeah.
going nowhere before the next idea came. And basically, maybe sometimes undid work you just spent a year doing. And
Yes.
I feel you. When you just were saying all that, I was like, oh, I know that leader. I know that leader
Yes.
personally very well.
Yes. So if that's you, maybe one basic tip to remember. There's a section of each chapter called
Yeah.
"Techniques to Be Less Terrible," because let's keep it reasonable. Um, so I just suggest 3 priorities maximum.
Yeah.
And the story there is that the word priority for most of its existence actually meant the thing that comes before all others, and it was a singular priority. Um, and then we sort of adapted it to mean like important things, priorities, many of them. But if you've got 8 priorities, probably you're not very focused. And a cool little mental technique that I heard about, and I wish I could attribute it properly, but maybe it's out in the world now. You write down all the things that you are supposed to be taking seriously. All of your priorities, and you rank each one on a scale of 1 to 10. How important is it out of 10? 10 is the most important, and most people give everything, a 7, 8, or 9 on the list. So they've got a list of 17 things, all with 7s, 8s, and 9s, and they functionally have 17 priorities. And so the trick is to put a star beside the 3 things that actually do matter, and you can choose the scope of this.
Yeah.
But if you had to choose the most, urgent or most important of the things, what really is most important, and then give yourself permission to write down a 10 out of 10 for those things, and
Yeah.
make everything else a 6 out of 10. Because if you don't do that, probably all 17 things are going to be a 4 out of 10. And most times when I've made significant progress on something that mattered, it's because I dropped a bunch of other stuff that was still important, but wasn't important today or this week or this month. So that's one little technique that people can use for that habit. If you identify as the consistently inconsistent folks.
So that is the half habit. Of the other 6, which ones do you get have you gotten the most response about, or
Mm.
people is there one that stands out a little more than the other or for some reason?
Yeah, I think the most common one that people find it easy to like think about is feedback fumbling. I call that
Mhm.
habit number 5. There's 3 ways to be bad at feedback. One is to not do it. 2 is to do it, but do it badly. And the third is to not take feedback very well. And
Yeah.
most people can identify with one of those things. It feels like, they say, oh, I would rather not do this. And often this is because we get our ideas about leadership from often our parents,
Mhm.
or bosses we've seen. And, it's sort of a little gentle invitation to do some therapy and self work. But I kind of joke. I'm just, armchair psychologist here. I'm not even in a real armchair, and but so don't take it too seriously. But if people don't like giving feedback, it's often because they were criticized in their past, and they don't want to be part of that in the future.
Mhm.
But feedback, number one, shouldn't just be criticism, and it actually puts you in a really good position to give feedback because you're going to do it sensitively, and that's what people want. So we need feedback to get better. That's part of how we hold people accountable. So we can't just ignore it and hope that it gets better. But of course, we're not the only ones with opinions. People who work with us have their ideas also,
Yeah.
and we can foster better conversations by being open to feedback and acting on it. So there's one that is like, that's a role that everybody knows in their job. It's like, oh, it is probably my job to do that as a boss, as a manager, but it's hard. It's hard. So you could go read other books about feedback and how to do that well, but there's lots of different models out there.
So there's a gem in there that I want to hop on and just put on your radar and remind people. So
Love it.
there is a guest that we've had on the show. Her name is Bonnie Artman Fox, and she actually started her career in nursing and then became a family marriage and family counselor. And
Ah,
she actually says how you engage in conflict is heavily based on family systems and what
yes.
conflict looked like in your home. And for many people, when they think about feedback, there's always an element of constructive feedback that
Mm,
many people take very defensively. And so
yes.
when you think about that, whether it's intended to be conflict or not, defensiveness comes into play, judgment comes into
Yes.
play. And I absolutely adore I love every opportunity I have to work with her because I had never really thought about, I mean, I've heard of family systems, you hear about that, how the
Yes.
work environments will mimic family
Yes.
dynamics and but I had never heard the conversations that we have had about how we show up in a conflict situation is directly affected by how conflict was handled in our home.
Mm,
And to your point, so yes, go do some reflection because if
yes.
every time conflict comes up, it's bringing out the worst in you or you're
Our
fumbling
default,
along with it.
yes, our default options are not necessarily the most effective options. Our default behaviors.
And you're not
Yes,
defined, you don't have to be defined by them. You can change them, but it requires the awareness to know that maybe, just
totally.
maybe, you are part of the problem.
Yes, yes. Maybe I'll go back here. This book, I realized as I was writing it, was about accidental managers.
Yeah.
Something like 80% of people identify, 80% of like leadership people identify as like accidental bosses, accidental managers. They weren't gunning for it. They
Yep.
didn't go to school for it. This shows up especially in small and mid-sized companies.
Hmm.
The really big companies, they tend to have like well-defined training programs and leadership tracks almost.
Yeah.
But in the small companies, the people who are the leaders are often either the founder or the founder's friends or the first employees who've been around the longest. Well, you seem to know what you're doing here. The boss just left. Why don't you start leading the team? Maybe people who have like a good relationship with some other people on the team
Yeah.
and say, well, why don't you lead? And the accidental nature of this is that many people um, are like years in before they realize that they're the boss, that it's their job to do these types of things. I talked with some folks who do a podcast about credit union leadership, and
Mm.
they said, I don't have the research for this stat, but they said the average manager in the credit union space is a manager for 10 years, 10 and a half years before they get leadership training. Like that, it's like, oh, no wonder
Oh my
it's hard,
gosh.
right? So the people are fumbling their way through this stuff.
Holy
Um,
smokes.
so even if that's half true, even if it's 5 years, it's five too many. Um, but
Even if
I
it's
get
5
it.
months, like,
Yes.
the damage that can be done
Totally.
unintentionally.
Yes.
So
Yes.
some of what you wrote in your book, you talk about that, like, so this particular part, I think about how many people get promoted because they're good doers.
Yes.
And it's just
Yes.
the assumption that, a good doer is going to translate into a good leader with
Yes.
no support.
Right.
And again, the lack of support is how you end up having a bad boss. They don't intend to be a bad boss. They just don't actually know what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Especially
It,
to your point, if they never ever intended to lead people, that may have not even been something on their radar that they needed to think about. And
correct.
oh God, just the idea of somebody drowning for 10 years. Imagine like the weird engagement
Turnover.
and the
y-
turn, and all because they simply didn't know how to do better.
Yes. It's heartbreaking, to think about. I think well, habit one of the book is called function forgetting. And this is sort of a good foundation to say, yeah, what are my roles as a boss, as a leader, a manager? And the basic way I think I like 2x2 matrices. Um, so think of long term and short term on one
Yeah.
axis, and task and people on the other axis. And so short term task focus, that's the project doing part. That's often where the kind of technical experts emerge from.
Yeah.
The long term task focused is strategy based. And so now when you're the boss, now you're not just responsible for doing the things, you're saying at least part of the time, are we doing the right things? You're doing the prioritizing for the team.
Mm-hmm.
The short term people focused side is the team dynamics. Are people getting along? So many bosses, they come and say, gosh, my team members all came to me like, I'm the leader, but they're asking, they've got these problems. Can't they sort it out? It's like, no, they're coming to you because you're the boss, you're the manager, and they want some help with that. And so that is sort of always on your radar potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one that most people either forget about or sometimes even actively avoid is the long-term people focused side, which I think of as those career development conversations. So like,
Yeah.
for instance, when you go in and you're a boss, it's like, oh, you know what you're doing. Why don't you lead the project? Rarely does anybody say, also, can you make sure that the people on your team are like fulfilled from a career development perspective? Can you have an annual conversation or so with those people and make sure that like this company and this team is the right spot for them? Nobody says that. You figure it
No.
out if maybe people leave. And this is how I figured it out, right? I had an assistant for 2 years, never once had a career conversation with her. She applied for the job. I assumed she wanted the job. And then she said, I've gone and found a full-time thing at this other place. I was like, oh, and she was totally amicable. But I
Yeah.
realized like, oh, I've never asked her, like, do you see yourself here for another year or two or 10 or like, what is that? So managers often feel sometimes like even having the conversation is coaching somebody out of their role.
Yeah.
And so there's this tension. They say, well, I want them on the team. But the mistake mentally is like, they're already thinking about that. Just assume they're thinking about leaving and what their next step is, or not necessarily leaving, but what is their next step? And you get
Yeah.
the choice as the leader to either be part of that conversation or to put your head in the sand and hope that it is not happening. Um,
Yes.
so that's that function forgetting. Like a lot of bosses just like don't do those four things. The hack is to get time on your calendar for those four areas. But I don't know what comes up there for you, Kimberly. Thinking of other stories that I can see your brain going on it.
I mean, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. It's
Yeah.
the idea that, so I just led a workshop yesterday around all around like boundaries and like
Mm,
getting in. It was all around leaders who are struggling with time, right?
mm,
Priorities, time. There's not enough of it. There's too many meetings. There's too many emails. And
yes.
so we basically broke it down of like, well, let's talk about how do you break your time down? What
Mm,
if you had to decide like what is actually important
hmm.
versus like it's important, but technically somebody else could do it.
Yes.
And then the other one being like, it seems important at the time, but it actually drives no value. And then like,
Right.
what is just you're doing it because it's the way it's always been done that way.
Sure.
And is maybe habit, people pleasing out of guilt, but actually drives no
Mm,
value for you. So it wasn't until we actually started asking those questions and then say, you realize you as the leader are your greatest asset.
mm,
Your time and your attention are your greatest asset. You are in the role you're in because of who you are, what you know, and what you can do.
It's a
And if
beautiful way of
you
thinking.
don't protect that by leveraging your calendar as one,
Yeah.
like I'm looking, like if you, that's a simple thing you can do. And that's always been my
Yes.
mantra is what makes or break people comes down to the littlest things, but it's
Yeah.
100 little things. It's not like two, it's 100
Yeah.
little things. Like knowing that as a leader, I have to think about the engagement of my team.
Yes.
When are you creating time to actually think about your team, ask
Yes.
questions of your team, like reminding yourself because you're being bombarded with so many messages every day? Leverage the tools around you to make you successful. Schedule stuff for yourself, make it a non-negotiable. That is as
Yes.
important as anything else you're going to do, because if your team keeps leaving, eventually HR is going to come back to you and you
Yes.
might be
What's
next.
going on here? Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so, like, but those kind of things, it's the message to me of how do you schedule stuff? Use the systems to your advantage. Ask hard questions. Protect your investment of time so that you
Mm.
can create the capacity for the things that actually mean the most. And yes, your team is very high on that list of what matters most,
Hmm.
because without them, you're a team of one, and that is a really hard and lonely place to be.
Yeah. What changes when you go from a doer, a producer to a manager? You're now responsible for the collective output of a
Yeah.
team,
Yeah.
and so that's the thing we bring up in this is like, what is the primary job of a manager, of a team leader? It's to get the most out of their team.
Mhm.
And so then you start asking, okay, so how do we do that the best? I really came to view this book as in my own journey, as a journey from accidental manager to intentional manager.
Yeah.
And like controlling the calendar is one of those things. Another neat thing, habit two, is mediocrity mongering, which
Yeah.
I don't think anybody intends to create a culture of mediocrity, but it comes up in the little things that happen. So people naturally on your team have different levels of aptitude or achievement. So how do you deal with the high performers compared to the mediocre majority? And and people have told me stories. Woman said like, "Oh, my boss came and said like, oh my gosh, like, can you just slow down? You're making the rest of us look bad." And she said, like, I thought that was a thing people pretended to say when they were pretending to be insecure. Like, what? You don't want me to work hard. So think of like A players, superstars. Every championship team has some superstars on it. Now, superstars are not enough to win the championship, but you rarely win without some superstars.
Correct.
And so how do you handle the superstars? Because they want to fly. What do they really want? They want to do good work. They want to be amazing. Um, and they want to be celebrated and recognized and achieved. And what they don't want is to be held back. Say, no, no, you take a back seat here. So if your actions are driving away or discouraging
Yeah.
your high performers,
Yep.
that's a problem. And people may not intend to do it. Why would you discourage your high achievers? But all it takes is some comment like that, or they just fail to get the recognition.
Yeah.
It's like all the people back in elementary school is like, well, so and so didn't do their part of the project. Are they going to get the same grade as everybody else? And
Yeah.
how do you think about that? And so this is something that managers can think about. How do I want to approach this?
Yeah.
Do I want to cut down the tall poppies or water the tall poppies? It turns out there's different expressions around the world for this. So it's a common thing. So this is you. Don't worry about it. Like there's a whole expressions. The
Yeah.
tall or the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. That's one of them. It's like, how do we want to approach these things? Another little set of things is habit three, which is hassle making. And hassle making, you think, why would you want to make a hassle? But good managers will remove the barriers from
Correct.
people, not add them in. And policy tends to be a bit of a hassle for people. Standard operating procedures. They're useful though, but where people feel that they're a hassle is where they don't understand the purpose of it.
Yeah.
So part of your job as a manager is to explain why you do things the way you do and make sure everybody buys into the process. And then actually try to look at what is annoying people and help them dismantle those obstacles. One of my favorite stories. This is
Well,
an
Joe, I
old
just want to
story
point
now.
out that
Oh,
that
please,
ties
please.
back to your feedback is that if you might be one of their barriers. You might
Yes,
be, but you won't know it if you don't create an environment where people feel like they can give you feedback without you
totally.
becoming defensive or might retaliate in some odd way.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
How many times have we been the bottleneck on some process? Oh, I'm waiting for your approval. How many times I've gone, I said, hey, where are we on this? I sent you an email about it a week ago. Did you see the email yet? No, I didn't respond to the email yet. I was waiting for you, and I'm the one that's disorganized, right?
I'm liking
I'm
how
a
like these
bottleneck.
play off of each other.
Oh yeah. So my favorite story about the hassle making thing is there's always these reasons why we can't get stuff done that we want. You remember back, are you old enough to remember cathode ray tube computer monitors? You remember the big clunky computer monitors? And
Mhm.
so this woman, she was retired. She said, I worked for this municipality, and we had these big monitors, and the sun would shine in the window. And at a certain time each day, the reflection of the sun on our computer monitors, we could not see the computer monitor, and we couldn't see what was on the screen anymore. And the way there were enough of us in this office that there was literally no way to rearrange the desks and the computers. And so they said we put in requests for, like, blinds for the window. Didn't happen. We put in requests to, like, physically change or move the office or get curtains, something, screen glare reducers. None of it happened. She said, like, one person ended up, like, sort of setting up this makeshift kind of jerry rigging his cardboard box and worked in a little cave so they could see their computer monitors. But most of us said we just took a break at that time in the day. Like, it changed throughout the year, but it's like in the spring and fall, twice a year, the sun is shining in, and mid afternoon. Oh, we can't use the computers now. And they just took their lunch break then. And, like, how much productive time is just, like, lost because, oh, this thing doesn't work. And on a more
Mhm.
practical level, although we don't cathode ray tube monitors, one of my pet peeves, it's like how much time the password remembering, or when you don't have the right permissions for
Yeah.
things, people are like, I was waiting for the permission to do this thing. All of these things are just hassles, for
Yeah.
people. And good bosses, I talked with the guy in investment banking. He said, like, to me, a good boss is somebody who will, like, go to bat for what you want and has the juice to deliver on it. Like,
Mhm.
they need to help you get what you want,
Well, it's
and
not even what you want,
make
but
it
what you
easier.
need.
Yeah, make it easier to do the job.
Yeah.
Um, so those are kind of the fun ones to me. Credit ceiling and finger pointing is habit number 4.
Yeah.
And that's really about bosses who hoard the credit and dish out the blame.
Yes.
Like, I always imagine the cartoonish, villains as who have some, like, crony sidekick, right? And they send the crony sidekick out to do all the dirty work, and while they're out doing, the villain is pumping themselves up, going, "I'm the smartest villain in the world," and then, of course, it never works out, and the crony comes back, and it messes up, and of course he points the finger at the crony. He's like, "You fool, you imbecile! How could you ruin my plan?" And it's, of course, set up that even 6-year-olds can see, oh, the big headed villain is the real imbecile here. Like, this
Yeah.
poor sidekick is taking all the blame. But uh, but managers do this often, often out of
Yeah.
their own insecurity. They say, I need to look good for my boss, maybe, but people
Yeah.
want recognition. So share the recognition and take the blame. Even if you take your part of the blame, it'll make it easier for other people to take their part of it also.
Again, it's one of the thoughts that keeps coming back to me is we make it seem so easy, but so much of this also is tied to the culture of where you are.
Yes.
And I often think about how many people I saw move into leadership positions who became different people because of the result of the
Mm,
boss right above them. And so in order for
yes.
them to survive, they had to become slightly different than who we knew them to be because the culture was
Yes.
one that was not supportive of certain things. So what
Yes.
would be your advice to someone in that situation of like, this sounds great, but some of these things are the culture of where I work.
Mm,
And in order for me to
yes.
be successful, I have to model the behavior of maybe someone who is not a good leader, but they're in a position of power.
Yeah. So the short term way uh, is to think of your own small team. If you're leading a small team, you have the most influence there. And you can say, okay, how do we want our team to be? So
Mhm.
I'm a speaker also and a trainer. And I feel like the highest leverage points are things like meetings and recognition and
Mhm.
onboarding. Those are the three areas where I would say really look at that. That's your chance to set the culture with the
Mhm.
people who work most closely with you. And there are a bunch of tips there. Lots of them are in the book, but just
Yeah.
intentionally say, what do I want to create in my little team? The next step is if you can communicate your philosophy with your boss, then at least it puts it out into the open
Yeah.
for like where there might be differences. So if you say, I view my job as a leader to get them is my job is to get the most out of my team. The way I think I can best do that is to give them the recognition and like really honor each of their contributions. But if things go badly, I'm going to be taking the blame for that because I want them to know that that's what we do. We take responsibility for our part in things. Oh, boss of mine, how does that
Mhm.
jive with your philosophy of leadership? What do you think about, me as an employee? And, you're my boss. I'm your part of your team. What's your philosophy of what my role is? And what do you think I should be doing as a leader on my team? And then if they really have the honest feeling that like, well, in this workplace, I don't think that you taking the blame for this is going to get you ahead. I think you should be hiding that. And I
Mhm.
think you should be pointing the finger down at the new employees who are messing up, because then they will get fired, and we have a very strongly, maybe hierarchical or a ranked system. Even lots of companies
Mhm.
have that where the bottom two get fired and the top two get promoted, and uh, it forces them to make that choice. And then you get to say, interesting. Okay. So you're not advising me to share the recognition equally amongst the team. Like, I'm concerned that that would create this sort of environment. What do you think about that? And you get to have that open conversation.
Yeah.
That's probably not an easy conversation. If it really is baked into the culture and it really doesn't jive with you, probably the longest term option, you want to be finding a different place that does fit your culture. Um,
Yeah.
but start with the smallest kind of circle of control. This is what I can do on my team. Second step, talk openly about it so that at least your boss knows that you have a different approach and it's a conscious approach. It's not an approach that's coming because you just like are an imbecile and you didn't think to do it better. As you're
Yeah.
saying, this is my strategy. What's your strategy? And what many bosses might say is, oh, that's a neat way of thinking about it. I hadn't actually thought about that before. And you might actually bring them around to your side a little bit.
I agree completely. I always say focus on what you actually can control.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
so much out in our world that we cannot. You cannot
100%.
control what your boss does or doesn't do, but
Yeah.
you can absolutely decide who you want to be every single day you walk into the
Yes.
office or you log into the office or however your situation
Yes.
is.
Yes.
You get to choose every single day. And
You
some
know,
days you'll be better than other days, but you
100% you will
still
be.
start each day almost with the ability to try to be at least incrementally better than you were the day
Yes.
before.
A little less
Uh,
terrible.
a little less
It,
terrible.
yeah. I don't know. I think it was a New Year's thing. I wrote about this in the book to kind of finish it off. It's like, where am I going with this? And I realized this little thing that I did almost by accident ended up having a pretty big impact on
Hmm.
how I managed. Um, the little thing was that I was in my, year planning. I think it was around a New Year's time. I was like, well, how do I want my team to be? And I wrote down something like, a happy, proud, grateful team. I want them to feel, I run a small business. We run a training company.
Mhm.
We're small. We've got 5 full-time, another dozen part-time and contract staff. And yeah, I want people to feel like proud that they work with us and grateful for the opportunity. And so then I was like, okay, that's how I want them to feel. So what do I need to do to make that happen? I'm the
Yeah.
CEO of the thing. And 3 words came to mind. It's like kind, fun, generous. Maybe that's how I do this. Kind, fun, generous CEO. So I wrote down those and I put them on a sticky note on my whiteboard or whatever. And occasionally I look back at those little 3 words. And when you're talking about like, how do I want to show up today? Those words really actually help bring some clarity. If I have to have a difficult conversation with a team member, I had to have a conversation the other day. A trainer of ours didn't really deliver to our satisfaction. Okay, well, how do I approach this in a kind, fun, generous way, as much as is possible right now? And often just kind of thinking about that helps bring some clarity to what I should do. So that's a little hack that any listener, any kind of manager could try. That literally takes 1 minute.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how do you want to be remembered as a boss? What do you want your team to say about you? If they were writing a letter or calling you into a talk show or something, how have you had to describe your boss in 3 words? And there's probably more than 3 words. Most of us are very multidimensional, but if you had to pick some, I don't know if anything
I don't
comes
know.
to
Our
mind for
attention
people,
spans
but
are really short. I think 3 is good.
3's good. Maximum
what
3 priorities, I heard.
But what I love about it, though, is it's such a simple act that you can do as an individual to say, if I want people to describe me in a certain way, if I want my team to describe me, what would be the 3 things that would be the most important to me? And then check in with yourself at least once a day and say, am I aligning with those 3 things?
Yes.
Like that's such
Yes.
it's again, I will repeat it probably till the day I die. It's the little things that make or break just about everything. Every
Yes.
relationship is about the little stuff. It's not the big stuff.
It
Because it's
shows
usually
up.
the little things that actually result in the big things, but it's those
Yes.
little incremental actions that we take or that we don't take that have the most significant impact.
Yeah. Have you
I
ever had a
love that.
bad boss or a really good boss? You ever had any
Yeah.
like moment that comes
I've
to
had
mind?
both.
What represents, let's start with the bad one. What represents the bad boss? Is there a moment? A lot of people have like, oh, and then they did this. And that's is there a story or some feeling almost that comes up?
I think the ones that I think always reside when I look across the leaders that maybe I had the greatest disappointment in, it
Mm,
was always the sense of there was a lack of respect.
uh,
Or it was either a lack of respect or what I felt was a lack of professionalism.
mm,
So for
yeah.
whatever reason, I was not treated very well. I was not spoken to in a way that was deemed professional.
Oh,
Um, maybe, maybe to some degree, I felt maybe I was taken for granted, kind of what you talked about earlier, where it was like, do you even see me?
yes.
Does it even register that way, what you just said, or how, like, the behavior that just took place is absolutely not appropriate. Um,
Yeah.
I would say that that's always come back to it. And I think the bosses that, when I think on the other end of the spectrum, it was around them taking time to actually make me feel seen, heard, and respected. And
Yes.
even if we didn't agree with each other, like that
Yes.
was even better because when we did disagree, I immediately knew their disagreement was coming from a place of like care and
Yep.
integrity. It wasn't coming from a place of personal attack or something that just wasn't something that you would care to associate with a professional situation.
Yes. Yes.
And, because usually that was the thing. When it was not good, you felt that it was a personal attack. It was something they had a grudge,
Mm,
or there was something personal about you that was the problem, and that may not have been the case, but it felt that way, versus the other where you were just made to feel like you were valued. I was valued.
yes.
And again,
Yes.
so when you think about recognition, how does a person want to be recognized? Is that important? Ask
Yes.
yourself, is it important if you feel recognized? If the answer is it remotely yes, then it matters to your team.
Yes.
And
Yes.
learn how they want to be recognized and valued. And I think people don't ask those questions because they're scared it's always going to be something related to a promotion or a raise.
Mm,
But the truth is, for some people, it is not. And you don't know until you have that dialogue with someone. Um,
totally.
so I
In
always
an
tell,
ideal in an
yeah, go ahead.
ideal world, all of us would separate our professional achievement from our personal sense of
Yeah,
self-worth. But in the non-ideal actual world,
yeah.
most of us have our professional achievements sort of intertwined a bit with
Well, because
our
you're in your professional life so
yes,
much of your waking life.
yes.
I always tell people this idea of a work-life balance is an illusion. We live
Mm,
one life. And it's the choices of that, of how you navigate it. So this thing of like, I can
yes.
be one person at home and I can be one person in the office. Maybe that was possible before. I would say that was probably more possible before COVID. And then COVID happened and blew the doors off of everything because
Yeah.
everything merged into one.
Mm,
And we are now in a place where I don't think we can separate those again. Our lives are fundamentally changed and
yes.
we are demanding something different in how we are treated. We're demanding something different in how we're able to live our lives. Because
Totally.
we now, I think, view life as something much more precious and much shorter than we've often convinced ourselves it really is.
Certainly many people do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The what you just talked about with your bad boss and boss actually alludes a little bit to the sixth habit, which is the one I didn't mention yet, which is bully bossing.
Yeah.
So bully bossing, it doesn't have to be the kind of big goon. Bullying is can be sly, and it's power tactics and fear.
Yeah.
And somebody described to me a boss who said, every time I went into a meeting, even if I was confident going in, I always felt like not very confident with myself coming out of the meeting. And I was like, oh, isn't that interesting? And you saying, I don't feel valued. It's like there was a problem with me
Hmm.
somehow.
Yeah.
It's that's there's something that's happening there where the person isn't viewing you as a human. They're viewing you as a means to an end or
Correct.
you get that work done or something. And
Yeah.
if you're viewed as a sort of just production means, um, yeah, then they'll use fear and power tactics to continue that. They won't recognize you likely, but yes, that's sort of what's the opposite of a bully boss. A bully boss is somebody who recognizes that there's a human on the other end of that conversation.
Yeah.
And instead of using fear and power tactics, I'm gonna try to see them honestly and ask, what do you care about? And what would be helpful for you? And how do we want to resolve our differences when we have them?
I mean,
It's
just
a very different way of thinking.
approaching people with, again, we can be very different. We can have conflict
Yes.
because I believe conflict is
Yes.
part of a healthy relationship. It's
Totally.
in how we choose to show respect to each other in those challenging moments that make or break
Yes. Yes.
everything.
And if you grew up in a family where like the people who have the most power take the most power or
Yeah.
have the most brute force, this is a way of seeing the world. And that shows up in many cultures.
Yeah.
But it is it the culture that helps people thrive and feel valued? I'm not sure that it is. So yes, I hear you. And the boss, what do people want? I just want to be seen and appreciated for this. People have shared you mentioned the littlest things. People have shared, I stumbled into this, but
Yeah.
somebody shared with me later. We started and I just took a half an hour with somebody on their first day and asked them, what are your goals? Let's not talk about work for a moment. What do you want to do in your life? And I have a little, life goal
Yeah.
thing that I went through. Um, and we're talking about this and weeks later, this person said, or I learned that this person said like, oh, that was so cool that we would take time on like day one and actually talk about me and not just like the job.
Yeah.
Like, I want to work for that guy. And I was like, really? It was like a half an hour.
Yeah.
Now, if you're scaling a big company and you've got 10,000 employees, like, okay, what's your onboarding plan? It has to be sustainable and scalable. Maybe the CEO can't deal with everybody, but just a little thing. What's the
Yeah.
little investment that helps you say, I care about you. This is the culture that we want to set here, because those, especially the early interactions,
Matter.
really matter. Yes.
Well, and again, it's it's understanding the culture you want and
Yes.
what are the behaviors that get you that culture.
Yes.
And
Yes.
again, to beat a dead horse, like it's not always the big things. It's making somebody feel seen. It's taking time to make sure that people realize that you see them as people. Like it's the
Yes.
littlest things that can have the biggest impacts. And
Totally.
I
One
just
way, one way you can do this, if you're looking for sort of a practical, if you're listening and like, oh, I'm a leader, where should I start with this? Is go and ask your team, what bothers you? Yeah, tell me about what you view your role as and what gets in the way of that. Like what bugs you? And just like write down the things they say. And probably you can't
yeah.
do stuff about all of them, but like make that list and say, thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to see what I can do. And then
Yeah.
like follow up on it. And they'll tell you exactly what they want from you in general. You know, like
You just
what
gotta
do I need
listen.
to be doing as your manager right now? Well, I need you to talk to that guy. He's bugging me here. I need you to, can you get this policy changed so we can actually do this? It's slowing everything down. See what I can do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just go and ask the people that you work with, what do you want from me? And that will change the dynamic of it, because it shows that you're open to adjusting your role and you're finding your way. Will that make it easy to be an amazing boss? No, but the hope maybe is that you'll be a little less terrible. And some days that's what I strive for.
Well, I think that is the perfect ending to this conversation is how do we be a little less terrible? I just want to remind our listeners, like the book is out.
It's out now.
The link is going to be in the show notes. Please go check this book out. Like Joel, I think you've created something absolutely wonderful. And I'm so happy to
Thank
be
you.
able to be a cheerleader for you and support you in this release.
Right on.
I definitely let's keep in touch and maybe we'll have you back on when you release the next one. Because
We
who
should.
knows? I'm
Let's
sure there's
do
going to
it.
be a next one.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
but thank you so much for your time. I genuinely appreciate you squeezing us into your big launch plan.
This has been a privilege to be here. If you want to connect with me more, you can find me on the social media things or LinkedIn or the book, wherever it's out. And if you, it's actually available now in all the formats, I think. We got paperback and audiobook and
All the funds.
and even a Kindle version in there. They're all there. So let's connect. And final invitation, I'd love to hear your stories. So if you want to share a bad boss story or a good boss story, I love hearing them. bosses@joelhilchey.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Kimberly. And we'll see you again soon.
Yeah. I've got 2 things before I let you go. 1, if you've ever gotten any value from the show, please leave a 5-star review. It really helps and absolutely makes my day. The second thing is if you have any thoughts you'd like to share with me, please shoot me an email at podcast@kimberlyjbenoit.com. I'd love to hear from you. All right, see you in the next episode.